Joining me now is Beto ORourke, Democratic candidate for president. And Congressman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joy. Grateful.
Thank you. Let's start with that threat. Can you give us an update on what was the response from the FBI? Has your campaign gotten a response back to that threatening tweet that was directed at you?
If we have, I haven't heard of it yet. I think this is a pretty routine matter. If we're ever threatened by anyone, we turn that over to law enforcement, as I think the campaign did yesterday evening. But I think that Briscoe Cain makes our case for us, that no one should have a weapon designed for war that's used to kill people as effectively, as efficiently, in as great a number as possible, because it can be used, as he tried to do last night, as a tool of intimidation to try to change our politics based on violence or threatened violence. So with more than 10 million of these AR-15s and AK-47s out there, after the shooting at Walmart, 22 dead, 7 dead in Odessa, Midland, many, many more killed in communities all across this country, it's time to not only 47s, it's to bring them back home, out of our streets, out of our communities, out of our lives. That makes us safer.
I want to talk to you a little bit about mechanically how that will be done. But before that, you're a Texan. Can you explain to those who do not understand this cultural phenomenon of essentially saying, I'm going to protect my Second Amendment rights and express that by threatening people and saying, come and get my guns, making implied threats of using the guns to hurt people or kill people as a tactic?
Yeah, I would not want to leave your viewers with the impression that that is a sentiment widely shared in Texas. In fact, I've spent a lot of time in Representative Cain's district, met his constituents, and what he said last night, the way that he's acted, his use of firearms to try to intimidate people, that's not reflective of this state. Gun owners, non-gun owners alike, Republicans and Democrats, no matter where you live in these 254 counties, we are proud of gun ownership, but responsible gun ownership that would never entail threatening somebody with that firearm. And so using guns to hunt or for self-defense makes a lot of sense to us here in Texas. But having a weapon of war, and even from those Texans who own AR-15s, they've told me this themselves, I don't need this. I don't need it to hunt. I don't need it to protect myself. It was fun to use. I like taking it out to the range. But if giving this back or cutting it to pieces or selling it to the government helps to keep us safer, then by all means, let's do it, because they'll tell me I have kids in school as well, and they ask me whether it's a matter of when or if a killer is going to come into their school and take the lives of their fellow students or take their kids' lives. So, look, we're either going to let the NRA set the terms of this debate. We're going to either allow Briscoe Cain to set the terms of this debate, or we will allow the American people, including March for Our Lives, which has come out with an incredibly ambitious proposal to bring peace to this country and do something about the 40,000 gun deaths that we see every single year. That's who we should be listening to right now. That's who I'm listening to, as well as people all across this country who want to see us actually do something about gun violence.
So I've been in a wormhole in preparing to interview you today about previous successful efforts in this country to ban firearms. So you know that you cannot have a Tommy gun anymore or a machine gun anymore because that was successfully outlawed. There's something called the National Firearms Act that actually used a tax on those weapons. They didn't even touch the Second Amendment issue, so the idea of taxing them, and then if you have one that you didn't pay the taxes for, that's a way to do it. How mechanically, how actually would you implement the policy that you would want to see happen?
I'm proposing a mandatory buyback. So everyone who owns a weapon of war would sell that back to the government, and we would establish a fair market price to compensate those gun owners for the guns that they would be selling to the government, that would no longer be in their homes, would no longer end up in our streets. So that is the preferred course. But I also fully intend upon listening to everyone, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, on this issue. If there is a better way to get them off the streets or to ensure that they are never used against us, I'm all ears. But after listening to people, including owners of AR-15s, this makes the most sense to me. Now, it will obviously require us to work with Congress and the constituencies of those members of Congress who I've been going out and talking to and listening to and who are there. And you mentioned that public polling is already beginning to reflect a seismic shift on this issue in America. It just needs to be reflected in our representation in Congress, needs to be reflected in the person who's in the White House. So I know that we can lead that effort. I know that America is ready. And I know that we have so much leadership out there with Moms Demand and March for Our Lives and others who are making sure that this country is ready to finally move on this issue after decades of inaction.
And, you made the point, I'm glad you made it, that, the Briscoe Caines of the world are a minority in the world, but they are there. There are people who will very openly say, whether on social media or not, come and get them, that attitude. So if you had, for instance, a mandatory buyback policy, how would law enforcement be protected from people who are essentially admitting that the way that they would protect their ability to own these weapons is to use them?
My faith, my confidence is in the people of this country. And going to a gun show in Conway, Arkansas, and listening to the owners of AR-15s and the vendors of AR-15s, many of whom, as you can imagine, did not agree with my proposal, but each of whom was willing to at least have the conversation. Some of whom said, look, you know what? I have an AR-15, don't need it, would gladly sell it back or destroy it. All of them seem like they would follow the law. We are a nation of laws. It's part of what defines us and distinguishes us from the rest of the world. So I believe that America will comply with the law, and I believe that there will be a due process in devising the law in the first place, where we listen to stakeholders, all concerned and affected, but do not allow the delays that we've seen that have lasted decades to stop us from finally acting on this. So I don't want to give in to the hype or some of the scare tactics that have been employed to stop us from even considering this in the first place. Much like we don't go door to door to enforce almost any law in the United States. In fact, I don't think we do that for any law in the United States. This would not be something that we would do. And I only raise that, Joy, because others have said, this is something that we would fear if there were a mandatory buyback program. No, we expect people to follow the law, and that's certainly what I believe will happen.
And speaking of fear, I want to talk about some of the members of your own party who are uncomfortable with the fact that you really have changed the conversation on gun reform in a very blunt way. I want to play you Senator Chris Coons, who was on earlier on CNN today talking about your proposal. Take a listen.
Are you supportive of a mandatory buyback program for all of those weapons, all of those assault rifles on America's streets right now?
I am not. And I frankly think that clip will be played for years at Second Amendment rallies with organizations that try to scare people by saying Democrats are coming for your guns.
You worried about that?
No. And Chris shouldn't be worried about it either. And look, first of all, I wish him all the luck in the world in being able to pass mandatory universal background checks in the United States Senate. And I know they've been working on it ever since at least 2013 after Sandy Hook to no avail thus far. But if he begins by allowing the NRA to set the terms of the debate, then we may have lost this before we've even begun. Let's instead of being worried about the NRA or the response to this very sound policy proposal, let's instead be worried about the fact that you have kids being shot by AR-15s and AK-47s in this country, kids who are afraid of going to school after this weekend on Monday, not knowing if they themselves will face a gunman. People in my hometown of El Paso, Texas, fearing going into a Walmart because they fear that they have a target on their back right now because someone was able to legally purchase an AK-47 and drive that weapon 600 miles and open fire on people innocently shopping before the first day of school in El Paso, Texas, before then one of the safest cities in the United States of America. That's what we should be afraid of and responding to right now. And those people, the survivors, the family members who've lost someone very dear to them, those are the ones who compel me. It is their judgment that I fear, not the NRA, not the polling, not the politics of this. Senator Coons' job is to define the goals and then help to bring this country around them. That's what I'm trying to do as a candidate, and that's what I will do as president.
Beto O'Rourke, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you, Joy.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.